So we come now to a piece that I wrote about 6 or 7 years ago. Wrote it originally, actually performed it here once before, probably about 5 years ago, I think. It was written originally for a triple anniversary at Temple Sinai. It was the anniversary of the congregation itself. It was the 40th anniversary of the congregation, the 25th anniversary of Rabbi Glazer being the rabbi of the congregation, and the 20th anniversary of the building. Now, this was about 6 years ago, so do the math, how old it is now. And so in planning for that triple anniversary celebration, I happened to ask Rabbi Glazer. We were sitting around the Kiddush after a bar mitzvah, and I said, any favorite texts, you know, that it might be nice to take off from? And he said, yeah, that we had not long before read the Torah portion from Genesis 18, the Parsha Vayera, which is where Abraham is sitting at the door of his tent, and the angels come to announce there are 3 angels, and they each come to announce one thing. One of the things they come to announce is that come 9 months from there, they're going to have a baby, which is kind of hilarious because Sarah at this point is 89 years old. Abraham himself is 99, and they're trying to figure out, I mean, each of them is trying to figure out how the other one's going to pull that off. And so they laugh about it, and they end up naming their son Yitzchak, which means laughing one. So that's what this is starting from. But the text itself simply talks about Abraham seeing God while he's sitting in the door of his tent in the heat of the day. So what I did with this text was I started with the traditional Torah trup, which is heard in this room every Shabbos morning, and decided that trup for that particular verse would be very nice to set as a melody. So you'll see the way you're going to hear that is Judy Alexander, who teaches Torah at Temple Sinai and also happens to be my wife, will be singing as she would teach it to a child learning Torah trup. She'll sing the verse the way it would be chanted from the Torah. She also often lanes in this room as well. Judy lanes here as well. Laning meaning reads Torah. So you'll hear her chant that. And then it will turn into a rhythmic melody with a little bit of a simple harmony. And then there will be 4 parts brought in. And they'll be singing the Hebrew of that text, still based on that essential Torah trup theme. Then there will be a section where the same theme is greatly elaborated in 4-part polyphony. You'll hear that kind of fugal section come in, where different voices start at different times. And then it turns into liberal Judaism. Now, what do I mean by it turns into liberal Judaism? Well, in any traditional shul, you might see people playing around with the text musically and setting it for voices, but you won't hear instruments come in. At that point, I introduce instruments. So we have our strings and piano come in, and they start playing a theme that is actually based, again, on the Torah trup theme, and in the middle of that, listen for when Sam, our violinist, starts all of a sudden playing Haftorah trup. He won't be doing the words, just the tune. Right? That's, if you recognize Haftorah trup, that's what that is. And after that, the choir comes back in. This time they're singing in English, but they're still tied to the text. They're basically singing a pretty literal translation of the text in English. Then we switch to Midrash. Now, what is Midrash? Midrash means searching out. So Midrash is where you take a text and you elaborate on it, often very fancifully. The rabbis elaborated on this particular text to note that what was Abraham doing sitting in his tent in the heat of the day? He was being hospitable. Why was he sitting in the heat of the day in his tent? Because he was recovering from his circumcision, so he was in a fair amount of pain. The men in here can probably relate to that on some level. So he was sitting in the door of his tent. It was hot. He was waiting for people to come, and so he was basically waiting to tell them, come inside. So at that point, we have a bass soloist, happens to be Steve again. Steve will be singing a little midrashic introduction just to lay out the idea of what the midrashic connection is. And at that point, Lily will become our soloist, and it all breaks out and turns into sort of quasi-gospel. So But one thing I want you to notice when it does that is there will be a moment after we're a little bit into the gospel section when all of a sudden the strings decide to come in and play the original truck. So they're going to be playing da 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 da. Listen for that when the other people are singing this other stuff. And then the altos will decide, well, that's such a clever idea, they'll start singing it in Hebrew as well. So they'll be singing in Hebrew, the original truck, at the same time as the midrashic, gospel-like thing is going on with instruments. And that is the quintessential state of American Judaism. All this stuff is all glommed in together. That's where. So there's my explanation.